Good morning. Oop, there we go. Can everyone hear me okay? Can we crank it up a little bit more? We're okay out there? I could use my dad voice, but my kids don't listen to it, so we'll try to stick to the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. When we put out the call for this conference, never did I expect that over 80 people would agree to be locked in a room to talk about housing all day. Amazing that you guys came out, showed up, and are here to talk about some really important issues in our community. So I appreciate you all making the time to be here and to be part of this. I got real nervous, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Hi, my name is Patrick Lancaster. I'm the manager of social programs and services with the city of Lloydminster. Our department has been tasked with helping to put together a housing needs assessment and strategy for the city. This was something that council directed us to do, and we've been working really closely with the economic development team and the planning team, and actually just like Catlin Duchesher and Natasha, I'm going to say it wrong, Natasha Pikova, in the back there, please. Can you just give a little wave? We've been working with them and having great conversations with a lot of you in the community to learn more about housing needs and some possible solutions. So again, really appreciate that we've got a room full of people who really care about this and have been willing to put in the time. Before we get into the program, I'd like to take a moment for a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, a gathering place, and a traveling route to the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge that many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. Now I would like to call on Deputy Mayor Laura Lee Marin to bring greetings from the city.
Thank you, Patrick. And good morning, everyone. It's indeed my pleasure to join you this morning in the heart of Treaty 6. How wonderful it is to see some old friends, some acquaintances, some new friends that I'll make today here. On behalf of Mayor Albers and my City Council colleagues, welcome to the Lloydminster Housing Needs Assessment Strategy Community Conference. So exciting to say that, and we made it to today, and this will be the start of some really good work in our community. Today, Council had two competing priorities. So Mayor Albers, as much as he wanted to be here today, couldn't join you. So Mayor Albers and Councillor Diachuk are away at another priority. And joining me today are my council colleagues, Councillor Fagnan and Councillor Whiting at the back of the room. I saw you join. I think that's all. So thank you to our city staff who have made a significant investment in the housing needs assessment. And I want to say a special thank you to Patrick Lancaster, Sheena Floriano on the FCSS team for their leadership on this project. To Scott and his team at BASA, thank you so much for your commitment to this project and for really getting to know Lloydminster and the residents of Lloydminster. To each of you has been informing the initiative all along the way. Thank you for sharing your perspectives, your concerns, your ideas, and your suggestions for solutions. We're so grateful that you have given the gift of your time today. It is significant and it is appreciated. I want to wrap up my welcome with a quote from Margaret Mead. Might be my all-time favorite quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Welcome. I appreciate you, and back to Patrick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So before I introduce our facilitators for the day, just a couple of housekeeping items. In the event of an emergency, our exits are to the rear of the room, and the closest exit out of the building will be to the left in the hallway. Washrooms can be found at either end of the hallway. As a courtesy to our presenters today, please take a moment, if you can, to put your cell phones on silent or to shut them off, understanding that many of you do have other commitments, maybe other concerns or family. If you do need to take a phone call, please just take it out in the hallway. I recommend taking several steps down, otherwise we'll have a good listen as you chat away out there. Having said that, it is with great pleasure that I will turn things over to Scott Cameron and BASA Social Innovations. We've been working with BASA now on a few projects within our department. You may recall the Social Needs Assessment and Social Policy Framework, which took place in 2022, where we engaged with residents to get a sense of what some of the community needs were, and to talk to folks and learn a little bit more about what's important and what are priorities in our community. We worked with BASA on the community safety plan, where we engaged with different vulnerable groups in our community to learn a little bit more about how we can help make this a safer community for everybody. And over the last 7 months, Scott and his team have been with us here in the community, having conversations, talking to many of you. And today we're going to learn a little bit about what was learned over that process. So please join me in welcoming Scott Cameron and his team.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. So I'll just take a moment to introduce my team. Avery Atchison is in the back there, and Adam Goodwin. Lloydminster is such a great place. And look at this. We got almost 100 people in a room talking about something that's important to everyone, and that is housing. Housing safety, security, affordability. It's clearly a topic that's near and dear to your hearts. And so our intention today, we're not finished the process. We're still working through this process. And when we started the process, we started with some scoping and key informant interviews. Let's have a conversation with Patrick and his team about, what are we trying to accomplish here? What's the scale? What's the scope of need? Or what are you intending? What's the outcome that you're looking for? Just understanding that perspective. And then speaking with a number of individuals in the community who we identified as key informants, people that, might be in the development industry. They might be working in a human services organization. They might be working with the city, but help us understand a little bit of the context around housing, just so that we know what the right questions are to ask. We came back in September and had a number of focus groups. It's great to see so many of you that we met at the focus groups, whether it was the focus groups on this project or on some of the previous projects that Patrick had mentioned. But we got a chance to dig a little bit deeper. Tell us more about. We're seeing data about some of these things. Give us the context. Help us understand what's happening in the community about that. In October, we came back and we dug one layer deeper than that with 5 different design labs. So the conversations were beginning to be data informed. Let's understand who are the players, who's doing what, how is this working, what do we really need to be able to focus on. We did a midpoint check-in back in December, earlier in January, with council and with the senior leadership team at the city, just to present what we had so far. And then here we are. Today is part validation. We want to present to you what we've been hearing, some directions that are emerging out of the design labs and some of the conversations. But then we're going to take it deeper again. We're going to have you start talking about strategy. So today is about taking the information, the what, so understanding the current state of housing and homelessness in the community, and starting to move towards the so what and the now what. So by the end of today, this will be the end of sort of the engagement portion of our work. And tonight, I believe Avery and I are back at the hotel storyboarding the final report and starting to get the writing all pulled together so that later in February, early March, we're able to come back to the city administrative team and council to present the report. I will note that at the conclusion of this, you should be able to pick up the report and see yourself in the report. You should also not be surprised by anything that's in the report, because we've been building this together with you. This is your community. You are the experts in your community. You know what your needs are. You know what your resources and opportunities are. And we're just walking alongside you to help capture that and compile it and put it together in a strategy to help move the community forward. So our agenda for today, we're going to start by just presenting our findings to date, talk to you a little bit about what we've learned so far. We'll give you a chance to ask some questions, share your observations about the current state. And then we're going to move into sort of 3 rounds of a panel presentation followed by some workshops. So this was a concept that came from the design lab, one of the design labs in October. There was really sort of 3 primary topics that emerged out of the conversations. So one is called housing options, the bricks, the sticks, the mortar. It's the putting the roofs over people's heads. It's the product. It's the infrastructure. It's the housing infrastructure. The second is around the housing supports. Those things, those conditions, those programs, services, supports that are needed to help people be successful in their housing at whatever stage they are in their housing journey. And then the third topic was around governance and leadership. And I'll leave you with this, that if you believe that that housing and homelessness is going to be resolved by the municipality, I'm here to say they can't do it by themselves. They don't have the capacity. They don't have the resources. They don't have everything that they need to be able to do this on their own. They need community and they need outside investment. And part of attracting outside investment is having a strategy and a plan to move forward. And that is the critical piece of this. So the municipality has already taken the first most important step, and that is putting the strategy together so that some of that outside investment can start to come into the community to help you address the situation. And then finally, we'll do some wrap up and closing remarks. So our findings to date. As I said, we're talking today about the current state, the what, and the future state, the now what or the so what. This morning's presentation will focus primarily on the current state, but also put some information out there for you to be able to talk about and respond to and react to and build on. So the first part of the presentation will be about the qualitative data. What are the numbers saying? When we look at census numbers, when we look at housing reports, when we look at real estate listings, when we look at all the data, what is it telling us? The second piece of that is the qualitative data, the conversations, the focus groups, the design labs. What are you saying? What is the information that you're sharing with us that helps us make sense of the data? And then we'll also present the findings from the point in time count. So on October 18th, we engaged with community, city-led, following national standards around point in time counts, and hit the streets to talk to folks experiencing homelessness and understand their situation better, to establish a benchmark in terms of how much homelessness is existing and how it's showing up in your community. Then we'll start to move into the future state. What are the projected needs? And talk about those 3 levels, those housing options, the housing supports, and then the governance and leadership required to move this agenda forward. So let's dive in. One of the first things that we discovered in the scoping conversations is that the city of Lloydminster is looking for the full spectrum, not just homelessness, and not just market housing. This is a diagram that comes from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Sometimes you see it with 8 stages. The best resolution one I could find is the one that has 7 stages, but it says the same thing. Basically, it's talking about everything from homelessness through to sheltering, transitional housing, supportive housing options, community housing options, affordable market, and then market housing. And the city's interested in the entire spectrum. There are housing options and there are housing supports required across the entire spectrum. So it doesn't, housing supports don't stop at one stage and the market picks up at the other. There's opportunities for options, housing options and supports along the entire continuum. When we look at the quantitative data, we're really looking at 3 sets of indicators: demand, supply, and affordability. And if it's difficult to read the slides, we do have on the tables some small packets. We've got many different charts and graphs and everything else that'll show up in the technical report. But for today, we're trying to distill it down to some of the key messages. Here in Lloydminster, you've had a steady population growth over time. So the 10,594 people is over the past 20 years. All 3 of those indicators on the right-hand side of the screen are 20-year numbers. So you've seen a steady increase in your population. Part of that increase is due to immigration. So that central number, that 3,508, certainly more immigration than the early part of the 20 years. But it's the third number that is actually driving some of the housing demand. It's an increase in number of households. And the increase in number of households is because the size of households, not just in Lloydminster, but we're seeing this across the country, the size of households are getting smaller. So you need more product to house the same number of people because the household sizes are smaller. And I love the way that this sort of concept was explained to me. And I sort of used my family in this diagram on the left-hand side. 10 years ago, there were 5 of us living in my household. Now we have 5 households. So over time, you take the same number of people and the needs in terms of housing start to expand. So it's important that the housing stock, whether it be market or affordable or some of the supportive housing, needs to keep up to that. That's the demand side. On the supply side, you can see by the chart on the left that the housing starts are not keeping pace. So again, 20 years, you can see in the early to mid part of that 20 years, you've had housing starts in the 300 to 500 housing starts per year range. On the 2021 side, between the Saskatchewan side of the community and the Alberta side of the community, you're not quite hitting 100. So in the charts and graphs that we've supplied to you, typically they're broken down to the Alberta side of the community and the Saskatchewan side of the community. It's not for the sake of pitting one side of the community against the other, but sometimes policy affects implementation. And so where there are differences, those differences need to be understood. The other factor on the supply side is that you have an aging infrastructure. When you look at these numbers, you've got roughly a third of your current housing stock that's more than 40 years old. Now, if you're the owner of that home for the past 40 years, that's fine. You've been maintaining it. You've been doing what you need to do to keep it, keep the standards and the quality and the safety and security up. However, if that's part of your rental housing stock, you start to see feedback like we were hearing, that you can find rental stock here, but there are concerns about the safety, security, and the quality of the rental stock. And that has to do with somewhat to do with the aging infrastructure. As I said, the affordability is the third factor affecting demand, or yeah. So here are some of the affordability indicators. Average dwelling costs and rents continue to climb. Doesn't matter whether you're on the Alberta side or the Saskatchewan side of the community. Rental costs and affordability on purchase are climbing. During periods of low vacancy rates, oftentimes what you see is the rental rates increase. But then if there's a fluctuation in the vacancy rates and you've got more vacancy, the rental amounts don't necessarily come down commensurate with it. Once they're up, they're up. There's also a growing number of households spending more than 30% of their income on housing, both sides of the border. And the median price to income ratio is a great indicator of that. So we've broken it down between the Alberta side and the Saskatchewan side. On the Alberta side, you can see that in 2001, the average home price was just over $98,000, and the median household income was just over $57,000, which meant that the price of housing versus the household income was about a ratio of 1.7. Fast forward 20 years, it's double that. It's at 3.5, with the average home price being $344,000 and the average income being $98,000 in a household. And it's the same story that's repeated on the Saskatchewan side, almost exactly the same numbers. As I said, we like to look at the quantitative data. What are the numbers saying? But then take a look at what you are saying. In all the projects that we've done here in Lloydminster, this first piece is always there. Lloydminster is a great place to live. It's a great community. Not many communities will get 100 people in a room to spend a day talking about housing. So your care about your community is showing up here in this room, is showing up in all the conversations. People love this community. The community is there to support one another. People come here because of the opportunity and they stay here because of the people. And so kudos to you. That's the type of community that's going to make a difference when it comes to housing and homelessness for your community and for your fellow citizens. We know that more housing is needed across the spectrum, and we're going to talk a little bit about that spectrum and the amount of housing needed just to sustain what you currently have. We also know that there's a need for strategic leadership. Of course, we always look to our municipalities to provide that strategic leadership, but they can't provide all the solutions. They have an important role to play, but it's not just the municipality that's going to solve this. It's going to take community, it's going to take business, it's going to take everyone working together. It's going to take external investment from federal and provincial partners. The community has a desire to prevent homelessness. You certainly want to address the homelessness that you're seeing on your streets and in your community right now, but you also want to prevent people from experiencing homelessness in the first place. And that's an important strategy that once in place, you can start to get a better handle on and support people to have a higher quality of life. And finally, strategic collaboration is vital to the long-term housing success. The social policy framework and the needs assessment that was conducted in 2022 talks about 7 priorities. Housing and homelessness is one of those priorities. Poverty, income, income equality, transportation, community safety. Those are among some of the other topics in your social policy framework. So housing and homelessness is one of those 7 priorities that you as a community identified. The strategy around the social policy framework is about using a collective impact approach. And one of the factors in a collective impact approach is mutually reinforcing activities. So things that you do in transportation, for example, will affect housing. Things that you do in housing will affect community safety. So the big strategy in terms of the social policy framework is that by having these tables focused on their specific topics, you have the ability to take that collective energy and move the needle from a policy perspective on many topics. So let's talk about October 18th, 2023, the findings from the point in time count. So as I mentioned, this is the first time that the city of Lloydminster has assumed responsibility for the point in time count. We worked with Patrick and Sheena to adopt the national standards on conducting a point in time count. So the important part of that for you to know is that you can compare your point in time count results to other communities across the country, because once you've used the national standards, then you've reduced any of the variations in methodology. And so we've used the national standard methodologies. So on the night of October 18th, 2023, there were 193 people, or at least 193 people experiencing homelessness in the community. 64 of those were identified as from being in a shelter, whether it's the men's shelter, the women's shelter, but they had a roof over their head that night. 49 people were identified having no shelter that night. So our teams are, I see some of the team members here that were out in the community that evening, speaking with people. These are people that if you're living on the street, you've built a relationship with them, you have a high degree of trust. So thank you to those of you that are here in the room that participated in the point in time count on October 18th. It allows us to understand the experience of homelessness from the people experiencing it. At least 10 people were couch surfing. This is a very difficult number for us to get a handle on, because if you're couch surfing, you may not have shown up in some of the locations that the surveys were being administered, but we did identify that at least 10 people were experiencing couch surfing that night. 3 were in public systems, whether that be in a hospital, in cells with the RCMP, some other institution. We worked with those institutions to administer the surveys. And then 67 people were experiencing, are still homeless, even though they're in transitional housing, which means that they're safe for now. They've got a roof over their head for now. It's not a long-term solution, but it's a longer-term solution than a shelter. So compared to previous counts, 2015, you were showing 205 people experiencing homelessness, and in 2013, 162. Again, from a methodology perspective, those are indicators, but we're not sure that we can do a direct comparison to those past point in time counts, because they may or may not have used the full national standards and methodology. You can, however, begin to look at that 193 and look at some other communities roughly your size. We haven't provided that information for you here today, because it's just about, let's understand the situation of homelessness here in this community today. What do we know about the people experiencing homelessness in the community on October 18th? Roughly 30% are in their 30s. So they're between the ages of 30 and 39. When you add those in their 40s, you're starting to get close to half of the people experiencing homelessness are in that age cohort. The length of time in Lloydminster is an important piece to understand. Roughly 35% of the people experiencing homelessness in your community have been in the community for 10 years or more, with 20% of those being people that are from Lloydminster. They consider this home. This has always been their home. This is where they've always lived. Yes, you do have a high number of people that have come into the community within the past 6 months on that night. But remember, it's still early in the fall. The weather hasn't quite turned yet. But that's also part of the national standard. There's a couple windows of conducting point in time counts so that there's some consistency, and weather and season is actually one of those considerations. People experiencing homelessness in your community on October 18th, 75% of them identify as being Indigenous or of Indigenous ancestry. 25% being non-Indigenous, and a very small number choosing not to identify through the survey. It's important to understand what type of homelessness people are experiencing in your community. Again, about 75% would be identified as chronic homelessness. So when you look at somebody that is currently homeless on that night, has been homeless a minimum of 6 months in the past year, or have recurrent experiences totaling about 18 months of homelessness over the past 3 years, those would be individuals that we would identify as having chronic homelessness. So it's not their first experience with homelessness. It's something that has been a pattern in their life over the past at least 3 years or more. 18% would be identified as those experiencing episodic homelessness. I would read it from my screen, but it's a little small. So those are individuals who are homeless on that night, and have been homeless for less than a year, and have experienced fewer than 4 episodes of homelessness in the past year. So they might be coming in and out of homelessness over the past year, and on that night were experiencing homelessness. And then you have those roughly 7.1% who are experiencing transitional homelessness. So this is maybe somebody that's in a particular situation. They were homeless on that night, but it's a new experience for them, a new situation for them, usually less than a month, and not on a recurring basis, such as those experiencing episodic homelessness. So let's start to move forward on the future state. What do we do about this? What's important to this? What we've been trying to do is blend what we're hearing in the community and what resources and strategies we already have in place with some of the best practices and emerging practices across the country. Fortunately, unfortunately, the reality is there are communities that have been doing this work for 20 years or more. I looked at my friend Ryan here. We worked on this file back in Red Deer when the federal government first announced funding for mid-sized cities. It was 2001. I think it was day 3 of my job, and it was like, hey, I think you get the homelessness portfolio as well. So there's been a lot of work done, and you don't have to repeat that work. You don't have to learn everything that has been learned over the past 25 years around addressing homelessness or looking at best practices or emerging practices in housing supply. So part of our job is also to introduce and provide some information to you about strategies that have been shown to work in other communities. It's your job to determine, okay, this one sounds like it would work. This one, maybe not so much. Or maybe this one with some tweaks and some Lloydminster elbow grease and determination could work in a different way. That's part of the strategy development for today. So what you see here are 7 different strategies that have been proven or are promising. So certainly increasing housing supply, that relates directly to the housing options piece in your strategy. Increasing access and improving affordability. That's a combination of the bricks and mortar, but also the supports and services that are required to help people be more successful in their housing. Strategic planning and governance and enhanced capacity, the whole sense of working together. That's why we're here today. That's why the city has engaged in this process of identifying strategies and articulating the current needs. Coordinated access, and we're going to spend a little bit more time on that this afternoon. People who are vulnerable in the community need to be known by name. They need to be understood in terms of their current situation, and their strategy to help them exit homelessness or prevent homelessness in the first place needs to be unique as their name. So coordinated access is an integral first step in addressing some of the supports and services. Funding, investment, and sustainability. As I said, you may want the city to fix this for you, but they can't do it by themselves. So by working together, you can put a strategy together to attract external investment. And that external investment is on the agenda for every provincial government across the country and the government of Canada. This isn't a forum for a political debate. I'll just put that out there today. This is a forum for rolling up our sleeves and figuring it out for Lloydminster. And there are external resources available to help you through that process. Partnerships and collaborative delivery. You're already well on your way. The social policy framework sets up the foundation for you to be able to work collaboratively as a community. All of you, whether you're working as a citizen, as a volunteer, as a community agency, whether you are a business elected official, you all have a role to play in supporting your community to address housing and homelessness. And finally, in evidence-informed delivery, we're going to provide you the current state. As of today, the best information that we have available. But tomorrow that's going to change. And 3 months from now, something else is going to change. And 6 months from now, you can see the pattern. You can't always just rely on the work that was being done today and being presented today. You need the evidence on an ongoing basis. You need to continue monitoring what's changing. As you adjust something here or tweak something there, it's going to impact something over here. You have to have a strategy to be able to collect and gather and understand that information as you move forward. What do you need in terms of housing? So here's our projections based on, excuse me, a 10-year projection from 2021 data. These are the number of units that you need to just maintain what you have based on your current trajectories. So let's cut right to the chase. Let's get the shock and awe over with. Between the Alberta side and the Saskatchewan side, you're looking at roughly 2,300 new units that are required between 2021 and 2031. Now, if you think back to that chart that showed the patterns of housing starts, you can achieve this. You can't achieve it at your current pace of development, but you can achieve it and you've achieved these levels in the past. So you have to be able to think back to what were the conditions that allowed us to be able to develop that much housing and why do we need it? This is an indicator. If you take a look at the sort of the income levels on the left side of each chart and think back to that continuum, you need housing at all income levels. Very low, low, moderate, median, and high. So this isn't 2,300 new units of deeply affordable housing. You need 2,300 units across the entire continuum. So as you think about those strategies and who needs to be part of those conversations, think about what do we need just to sustain our community and its development. Now, if you have major industry announcements, you're going to need more than that. And so that's why that column, the middle column is plus or minus. If you have other major downturns in the economy and your population starts to decline for whatever reason, these numbers may change. But based on our understanding of your current situation, this is the projection, the 10-year projection in terms of the housing needs for Lloydminster. On the supportive housing side, we have a few more variables. We still have information that we need to gather to be able to understand some of that by name piece. Who is in the shelter? Have they been in the shelters for a long time? What are their current needs? So there's still a number of assumptions that they're making. So some of these are a little looser. But it's important to know that while you need the bricks and mortar, you also need specific types of housing to be able to address your current needs in the community. So let's talk about those. We're not standing here saying that you need to build a whole bunch of new shelters. People living in a shelter or people staying in a shelter are still homeless. You have not addressed their situation. You may have a roof over your head for 30 days, but you are still experiencing homelessness. You're still experiencing homelessness if you're in transitional housing, but it provides you with a level of stability more so than a shelter. So it's an important consideration. It's an important opportunity in the community to have transitional housing. You know, one of the examples that has proven to work well are families fleeing domestic violence. So they may go to a shelter for a short term, but then they may need something a little bit longer, 1 to 2 years, where they can pause, figure out what's next, and then move forward with their lives. So transitional housing has an important role to play in the big spectrum. Then there's a number of programs and services. Permanent supportive housing. This is a strategy or technique widely used in the housing first philosophy. It's not unconditional. It's unconditional entry, but it's not unconditional housing. But permanent supportive housing provides people with the supports they need to be able to potentially address some of their underlying conditions that led to their homelessness in the first place. And fortunately, we have some very wise people joining us this morning that will be able to shed some more light on that, on these programs and services. Rapid rehousing is a process of being able to identify somebody who has needs and get them into a housing solution immediately, therefore ending their current unhoused situation. And then, of course, at the bottom, we talk about some of the other social housing units. This is more in the bricks and mortar side, but also things like rental assistance programs and services that can help prevent homelessness and stabilize people in their current housing situation. I want to talk a little bit about coordinated access. I don't want to get too deep into this because there are some folks here in the room that can go deeper into this topic. But essentially, it's a process of coordinated access. So where people can enter into a system that's designed to be able to help them move beyond their current situation of homelessness. So access is an important piece of that. And then immediate triage. Are there things that can be done to prevent you from experiencing homelessness? Let's do those things so that you don't have to have an unsheltered experience. And then a deeper assessment, prioritization. So identifying the highest acuity individuals in the community and putting them at the top of a priority list to be able to end their homelessness. So in this situation, where 75% of your homeless population would be identified as being chronically homeless, they would be at the top of the priority list. And then immediate placement. So having an infrastructure in place so that people, when they begin to experience homelessness, have a pathway to end that homeless experience. I'm looking over to Ryan and Lori. How did I do? Did I do okay? Did I step in anything? Okay. Phew. This is sort of that piece in greater context. There's a number of moving parts to having a system framework to address homelessness. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's something that needs to be in place if you're going to attract that external investment. The Reaching Home program, which we'll talk a little bit about this afternoon, is not going to happen here in your community without a framework for it to operate in. So part of our strategy here today is to blend what you're telling us, what resources and experiences you have in your community, your own data, with some of the realities of what you're going to need in the community to be able to address this and attract the investment. It's just another, it's not a straight line process. As you can imagine, it's a very complex set of relationships and programs and services that work together collaboratively and collectively to address the situation for people. Now, some of the governance and leadership insights that we've gathered, again, this is a compilation of what we've heard in the community, along with what some of the best or emerging practices in the communities are across the country. You have the social policy framework already in place. we will design a strategy to, pop in the housing working group into that larger piece of infrastructure. We need people to assume leadership roles in that housing working group. And if you're looking for the city to do this, if you're looking for the agencies already working in this, they're already in it. We need other people in the community to be able to come forward and provide their leadership skills to this topic. There are a number of things that we've identified that may be appropriate roles for the municipality. Facilitation, engagement, support to the process is one of them. Data management and research. We talked about that evidence-informed approach. Having somebody continuous, foundational that's monitoring what's happening and providing that insight and research to the process is important. And then looking at the policy coordination piece, which is really what the social policy framework is intended to do. Engaging with and maintaining open dialogue and communication with neighboring communities. It's no secret, Lloydminster is a hub. You're a hub for Eastern Alberta and Western Saskatchewan. People will come here to access supports and services of all types. That is not a reason to not provide them. It's a reason to provide them in a manner that is sustainable and welcoming. It's not to suggest that you're throwing your doors open to everyone who needs anything, but it's also not turning your back on 30% of your people experiencing homelessness who consider this their community. So it's that interesting balance. So I'm just putting it out there. Becoming investment ready. There are program services, things that you can have in place that will attract that external investment. And these are some of those decisions that need to be made. Do you have land in place? Do you have financing in place? Do you have policies in place? Do you have collaboration in place? Do you have support services in place? Those things need to be in place if you're going to attract investment. Gone are the days of saying, hey, we've got a great idea. We're going to just put a big proposal out there and see if there's any takers. Because there's been a lot of investment over the past 20 years at different levels of government that has just sat there in the planning stage. And so to attract investment, you have to have things in place. Enhancing the use of evidence-informed practice. Don't be afraid to learn from other communities. You do not have to figure this out by yourself. There are experts across the country doing some really great things. There are experts across the country that are tapping into international knowledge. So we have knowledge, resources, insights, failed experiments that have been learned from. You don't have to experience everything for yourself for the first time and learn those lessons on your own. Enhancing community housing collaboratives through collective impact strategies. As I said, by working together to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and some of this from different sectors means that you can work together and likely need to come up with some made in Lloydminster solutions. You have the unique distinction of being the only border city with a single municipality spanning 2 provincial governments. A number one priority needs to be bringing the housing bodies from both the provinces together to have this conversation, which we were seeking to do today. And there's definitely interest there happening. So the process has started. Also understanding that nobody experiences housing or housing insecurity or homelessness in the same way. Gender identity, sexuality, ethnicity, past experiences, all those things play out so that any one of us that may have or experience homelessness in the future will not do it in the exact same way. So being aware that the experience of homelessness or even the experience of housing insecurity is backed by many different reasons. And each reason is valid and needs to be understood. And finally, adopting a housing first policy, understanding what that is, what it is not. But understanding that the only way to address homelessness is to ensure that people have housing and supports. That's the other one that I wanted to look to see the reaction from these two, whether we got this down pat. So that's our summary of the current state. So I would invite any questions. I'm joined today on Zoom by my colleague Franklin. He's back in his office in Red Deer, but he's available should you have any detailed questions on some of the data. Adam is here as our lead on the point in time count. If you have any questions, and of course, Avery supported the qualitative data assessment. So between us, we should be able to provide you with a response. And if not, we can get back to you with a response via Patrick and the team. So what's resonating for you? What's surprising for you? And is there anything that doesn't seem quite right that we need to take a second look at? And I believe Cody has set up a microphone in the center here so that if you have any questions.
Testing. Thanks, Scott. Question for you, going back to, housing is a wide spectrum. It starts from, the upper end, way, down to the lower end. And I guess one of the questions that and I don't know, maybe we brought it up when we saw this in council, but one of the questions I was wondering is, trying to balance the supply and demand of, say, the rental market in our community. Do we take into consideration, say, a vacancy rate or what is readily available and what that looks like? And like, if there is lots of rental available, then there must be an affordability problem. If there's not a lot of rental available, then we're looking at a supply problem. And because there is a lot of talk about the need for future housing, whether it's just doors or buildings or units, I'm not sure, but there is a need for a lot. And so I guess in my mind, trying to balance from a point of view of a municipality, what we need to do to encourage, if we need to encourage more. You mentioned investment in multi-dwelling units for, say, the upper end of the spectrum of housing, to allow for more at the lower end, or, just that balance, I guess, just a question about rental market and that.
Yeah. So we'll have a deeper analysis for you in the report. You have Franklin, you can jump in here if I'm not getting this right, but currently you have a high proportion of single family dwellings, which by the very nature means that they're less affordable than something that would be a multi-unit. So you're absolutely right. It needs to be balanced and evidence informed in terms of what's needed in terms of rental supply versus supply to be purchased. The other piece is that some of your rental supply is not a question of affordability. It's a question of condition. And we started to hear that conversation when we were doing the community safety strategy, that I can find a place to rent, but I don't want to live there. It either doesn't feel safe to me. It's not well maintained. It's old. And so I'd rather continue to stay in my parents' basement than rent something in the market. So today in one of the breakout sessions, we actually have a session talking about that piece. And it's not about placing blame or fault, but it's part of that balance equation. So we'll have a deeper analysis for you in the final report.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes.
Hi, Stan Beguer is my name. I wonder, is senior housing encompassed in this study, while supported or unsupported, but specific to seniors housing?
So I didn't speak to that specifically today, but we do have the ability to be able to break that down in terms of some of the data. It didn't arise as one of the significant concerns. In some of the other communities where we've had conversations, seniors housing or access to next stage of life type housing was the primary concern in a community. We didn't necessarily hear that, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to have some deeper analysis in terms of housing availability for seniors and because you know, as you do one thing in one part of that housing spectrum, it impacts other parts. So if there's more seniors housing and people are leaving their single family dwelling, that changes some of the market conditions for that type of housing that may be more affordable in the market side. So it's certainly a consideration, something that we're taking a look at in the numbers, just not highlighted today. Thanks.
I'm going to jump on the mic here, Scott. Not a question, but a comment and a thank you. I did want to take a moment to acknowledge the volunteers that came out at the point in time count that was conducted on October 17th. And so if you could humor me, like Tyler, Tigra Lee, Deborah, I think you're here somewhere, and anyone else who participated, could you just stand up for a moment? And I just want to say thank you to you guys, and for folks that are not familiar with how the point in time count went. We had volunteers, these teams that went out in the community, and they were everywhere. You guys are out at encampments. You were out in the middle of the dark with flashlights and lamps and all around the downtown and everywhere. And we really wouldn't have been able to capture the stories and the information that we got out of that experience without the relationships that you folks have with people in the community who are experiencing homelessness. And we're really grateful for your cooperation and your collaboration. Again, no one wants to come and talk to me and do a survey, but you guys have those relationships, you have that trust because of the great work that you guys do, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Not to mention you're wearing a tie today, so there's that. I think, well, actually, Patrick, do you want to answer that? Because that's sort of within your control.
So my understanding, and Scott, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, is best practice is to conduct the point in time count every 2 years. We do intend to conduct a point in time count again this year, as it'll be one, we completed this one with a lot of support from BASA. We want to do another one this year, working with community, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? The training wheels will be off, and this will be our opportunity as a community to do it without that extra level support. So our intent is to do one this year, and then the standard would be to conduct one every 2 years.
Great. Thanks, Patrick.
In your study, you had mentioned three different types of homelessness: the chronic, episodic, and transitional. And I know that the point in time was only conducted recently, but based on other communities, nationally, provincially, have you spotted trends in each of those three different types of homelessness?
So I'm going to ask either Adam or Franklin, are you available to help us with that question?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Let's see from a technology perspective.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Or Adam, are you able to answer that? Yeah. Oh. Oh, there
Can you
you are,
hear me?
Franklin. I'm not hearing you though.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah, thanks, Franklin.
Okay. So yes, we did compare to some communities. I think that the most of the data that jumped was the indigenous part of the representation that was much higher than some communities that we've seen. In terms of the episodic, based on the definition, the variation is not that much from other communities in terms of based on the definitions provided by the government of Canada.
So just to clarify, Frank, the ratios of chronic, episodic, and transitional homelessness here in Lloydminster is similar or comparable
It's
to?
similar to based on that definition that was used.
Right. Okay.
But in terms of indigenous representation, that's much higher than many communities.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Franklin. See another question coming forward.
Good morning. My name is Josh Campbell. I work for the Saskatchewan Housing Corporation out of the Saskatoon office. I was just wondering if you could speak to the overhousing or underhousing of the housing stock in Lloydminster, if that ever came up.
Franklin, do you want to tackle that one as well?
Yeah, so what we looked at from that angle was the number of people who were living alone. And so when you can see we are seeing an increased number of percentage of households that are living alone in terms of that. So, and then combine that with the number of single family units alone that we have, that tells you that there is an element of overhousing in Lloyd.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so to be overhoused would be, to give an example, like let's say if you were a single person living in a 3-bedroom townhome, and if you were underhoused, you would be a person like, let's say if you had a large family living in a 2-bedroom apartment. So in that perspective.
So Jason, that speaks to your question about sort of what's needed and what type of housing, what are the different options required, rental, purchase, size of units, those types of things. Yes. Franklin, the question is, what do we have too much of in Lloyd? You're talking about sort of the actual housing stock.
Yes, so I think it is that we need diversity of the housing options. So we are still there is still the predominance of single family homes, and that does not provide a lot of options in terms of, so we tend to see a lower vacancy rates and a higher rent because of the single family unit as the dominant or the predominant housing option. However, as the community is expanding, we need to look at it from the angle of more diversity in the housing types to be able to accommodate the diversity of needs across the spectrum.
And I think part of the answer to your question, Jason, is that chart that showed the 2,300 units across the different income levels. And so you could safely say that unless you're creating very low income purchase housing, the majority of that housing, the majority of those units would need to be in the rental market. Other questions, observations, insights? Do the numbers tend to resonate with you? Does it like, okay, that makes sense. That feels like Lloydminster. I mean, that's the first sniff test, if you will. I'm seeing some cautious nods. Maybe it's not what you wanted to hear, but.
The number of the point in time number that was up there. The one thing for us that, or me specifically, that caught me off guard was that it's lower than the previous survey. But you gave a good explanation of that to us in council, and maybe that should be explained here too. To kind of, I thought it would be higher. I thought that we would see this trend going up, and it is if you go back to the previous one. But it's I maybe explain that so we have a better idea of what's.
Yeah, I think the simple answer to that, and Franklin or Adam, you can add to this, but it could just be methodology, how the point in time count was conducted, and so with increased rigor, with increased, it could simply be methodology. It could also just be the night. That's the nature of doing a point in time. It's literally one day in a continuum. So, you know, there could have been a factor where people left the community for one reason or another on that night. But I would say the bigger answer to that is methodology.
I just had one question, excuse me. You had 75% of the chronic homeless, or 75% were more chronic, long-term homeless. Were they single individuals or family? Would that make a difference as far as the housing needs? Were there more single or family?
Yeah. Franklin, you probably have the data in front of you. Can you answer that one? We don't have it on the sheet that we've provided here.
Yeah, so it's a combination of, so when you look at the point in time count, the source of the data includes transitional housing. Within the transitional housing, we had a lot of families compared to the shelters. In the public systems too, we have more individuals. Couch surfing too, we have more individuals, but in the transitional housing and also from the women's shelter, there were more families involved when it came to that point of the data.
And those numbers in terms of families may not necessarily be in that chronic homeless category. They may be episodic or transitional.
Yes, but they could also be one of the things which we've found is that they are also those that have stayed much longer in the transitional housing than the time period they should be in there. So that's the other reason why they are counted as chronic, because they've been based on that definition more than the 18 months in not in long-term housing, but all the institution, all the housing types that we would consider as being homeless.
Thank you. Clearly.
So I kind of have two questions. One falls under the transitional housing part, but so for those that were living in like sober living or sober housing, where would they fall in this list of unsheltered, emergency sheltered, couch surfing, public systems, and transitional housing? Yeah.
Okay. Adam, do you
So,
want to? Oh,
so for
Franklin?
those in sober living, once the number of days are beyond 30 days, which is what we use typically for a shelter, and then the recognition or the mandate of the institution also being transitional, then they would not necessarily be. So I want to make a difference between what we mean by transitional housing and those who are transitionally homeless. These are two different definitions we are looking at based on the length of time in homeless, the number of episodes that the people have indicated they have. So somebody may be in a transitional housing as at the point of the count. However, because they've indicated they have had various episodes of homelessness before coming to the transitional housing, they will still fall under chronic homelessness because of that criteria, even though they are living in a transitional housing. So it is the length of time, the number of episodes, and that we use to determine the typology of homelessness. It's not where you are residing at the particular time when the point in time was conducted.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
And my second question would be about public systems. How did, I guess it would be really, really hard to get that number. I was wondering if you could explain the process of how you got this number. I feel like, I personally feel like this is incorrect. And it would, if we could get a better handle on identifying those that are in the public systems, I feel like it would greatly impact those other numbers.
So we can speak to that from two perspectives. Through the methodology and partnership with some of those public institutions. I know that part of what we were doing was going around from some health service providers, RCMP, so on, collecting surveys that they had administered during the day. So that's the process of. I would suggest that part of your process moving forward is to have those public institutions actively involved in your systems framework so that from an evidence-informed basis, you can see sort of immediate trends or changes in that number over time. How did I do, Franklin?
I think you do, and it depends on people voluntarily coming forward without fixed address, indicating that that they are homeless. So if the health system does not provide us that number that night, that's the number we get. We are not allowed to administer service or being able to have access to the information to know those without fixed address on the night of the count. So it's only the institutions that provided us this survey based on that number. That's why the number can be low. So it's not we who counted this number. These are the institutions that volunteered this number to us. So yes, it can be underestimation because of that element.
So welcome back. The way we've structured our conference today is sort of in three parts, as I outlined in the agenda. First part was just where are we at right now. That was that presentation, your opportunity to learn about some of the numbers and what's behind this strategy moving forward. We talked about the three component parts of the report that we're putting together: housing options, housing supports, and the governance and leadership. Within each one of those, we've broken the day into a combination of a panel presentation followed by breakout sessions. So we're going to start with a panel discussion this morning on the housing options. And so I'm happy to have Derek Ramage here from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation and Natasha Pitkova. Did I say it okay? Okay. I have just resolved something that the rest of the community has been struggling with forever, apparently, is that she's just known as Natasha. She's sort of like Cher, only because nobody really wanted to tackle her last name. So Pitkova, everybody say it after me. No, just remember it, because your name is important. So I'll ask the two of you to come join me up front. We've got just a few questions that we want to explore. So this is an opportunity to just share information, learn a little bit more about what's happening in the community and what's available to you. And then I'll explain to you what the different breakout sessions are. And then you get to choose your adventure for half an hour afterwards. So I'll just start actually with Derek. And then I'm going to take a seat. So maybe I'll just start with both of you, just an opportunity to introduce yourselves, the organization you work with, and your role in housing.
Sure. As Scott said, my name is Derek Ramage. I've been with Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for 20 years now. And as the name suggests, it talks about housing. So I've been fortunate enough to work in a lot of the different lines of business that CMHC has. So I don't know if you remember at the start of the presentation when Scott had that continuum up there and he said it was CMHC. So that is kind of a mainstay of some of our publications that we have. And I've had an opportunity to work in pretty much all the continuum, right? So right from home ownership. So I used to come to Lloydminster all the time. I used to be with insurance, right? So I'd work with the banks. If you had less than 20% to put down on your house, you need to get mortgage insurance, right? So I did that for 10 years. And the last 10 years, I've been in affordable housing, specifically both on reserve affordable housing and off reserve affordable housing and I work with Indigenous groups and I work with affordable housing groups in the province, but more specifically in the southern part of the province in Regina. So just quickly, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, we are a crown corporation of the federal government. So we operate totally independently of them. We have our own board who makes our own board decisions. We have our own CEO, all that kind of thing, right? So I'm not going to bore you with the details, but at the end of the day, CMHC generates funds from mortgage insurance. Those funds pay out for rainy day mortgages that people might default on. We're not here to talk about that, but that's part of the role CMHC has. And also CMHC plays a role in affordable housing, both with several programs that we offer, shelters, transitional homes, on reserve housing, all those sorts of things, which in the Indigenous arena, I'm very familiar with. So I just kind of wanted to say that right off the top. So that's about it.
Great. Natasha.
Thank you. Well, I don't have that much to say. My name's Natasha Budkova. I'm the manager of planning with the city of Lloydminster. I've been working with the city's planning team for over 13 years now, involved in a ton of different projects. The team I lead, we do everything from, the acquisition of land through the development permit process, as well as working with our intermunicipal relations. The biggest thing right now is our city's team is working on the land use bylaw, and the land use bylaw will have direct implications on housing in Lloydminster.
Great. Thank you. So just a little bit further on your introduction, Natasha, for anybody that's particularly interested in the municipal role from a planning perspective relative to housing, the breakout session that you might be interested in is this one over here on the side. So these are not sort of city strategies, but these are strategies, as I said earlier, we're trying to pull together information from other municipalities, best practices across the country. So these are strategies that could been and have been proven to be effective. Some of them will make sense for Lloydminsters and others might. And that's part of your engagement today, is taking a look at these 8 strategies and saying, okay, I think this one could work well. So it's meant to be information to help inform the municipality around potential roles and opportunities in development in housing. So Derek, in your work, you're seeing what's happening in communities across the country. What are 3 critical factors that you're looking for when you're seeing submissions from communities or for projects that say, okay, this looks like it's designed to succeed? And of course, we certainly don't want to blame any funder for wanting to find those ones that are going to be most successful. What are some of those factors?
Well, the first thing I'll say is actually just something to see, right? Like something to actually look over and read over. So like a proposal of some sort needs to come across the desk to say, okay, here's the plan, right? So it's no different than like a business proposal you would put through a financial loan through a bank, right? What are you going to do? What is it for? Why are you doing this? All those types of questions to say, okay, you've done your homework, right? So anytime a proposal comes in, for us to feel confident, we want to understand that this person has done their homework, so to speak. So, I mean, I've personally seen ones coming in with like, we'll have we have some programs right now that's on our website. It's specifically listed the criteria that you need to apply for this. And we'll get some proposals that'll come in with 5% of the things that are there, right? Well, right off the bat, that one is going to struggle because we can't even look at it on like apples to apples with all the rest of the proposals coming in. So the first thing is actually something to see. And we understand that costs money. So where are you going to get that money from? Well, if it ends up being approved by CMHC, we'll give it back to you, kind of thing. So there are things in there, but even conversations with partners. So that's the second thing I would say, working with a partner, right? So if you're a affordable housing group or a land developer or whatever continuum that you look at in that continuum or part of it, who is your partner with this, right? Because if you're looking for some money or some help or some let's say some relaxed policies, so to speak, to get this thing through, you need to have a partner. And how is that partner going to benefit the whole situation, right? So if you come to CMHC and say, okay, CMHC, we'd like some capital for this project. Okay, well, what are you doing, right? Like, so it's that dialogue and that discussion, right? So you basically, and it was talked about a little bit earlier, you just can't do it on your own. It's just not possible for one person to go out and just change the world. It can't happen. So you need partners. And whether it's provincial, who I can only speak for Saskatchewan, who I've seen money into housing projects, but only when there is something there that they can go, yeah, we can support this, right? So it's similar. It's similar to CMHC in that we say, yeah, we just need something to look at, but it has to be a partner of some sort, and ideally more than one. So probably the municipality has to be almost your first partner, because this is where the house sits, right? I mean, the house doesn't sit anywhere else except in your community. Yes, it's in Saskatchewan. Yes, it's in Canada, but it's right in the community itself. So those are the first people they go to if there's a problem or anything like that. So the municipalities certainly would need to be involved. And then the federal, hopefully CMHC. So we do administer a lot of the federal housing programs, like any of the programs that have come down recently. Rapid Housing has one. Well, it's been three rounds of that now. CMHC did administer that program. So I would say partnerships and plan.
Great. Just further to that, in the next breakout session, I talked about this sort of poster session that might be in terms of municipal role. If you're interested in having a conversation about partnerships, we have a breakout session immediately following this around the opportunities for partnerships, whether it's service providers, business, municipality. So like this is your opportunity here in this room to have a half-hour conversation with people who might be interested in being part of a process to get some housing options here in the community. So Natasha, I talked a little bit about the poster session that's coming up after this. What are some of the things that is happening in the city of Lloydminster now from a planning perspective, from a land perspective, from sort of any of that sort of policy level or decision-making level that would impact housing options in the community?
So last year, the city approved a new municipal development plan, which set forward the vision for the city and how we will support development, encourage development, and grow as a community forward. To really implement some of those ideas and strategies in there, the city is reviewing our land use bylaw. Regarding housing, there's probably 3 or 4 areas of housing that are really being critically looked at by our team. We're looking at bringing in alternative forms of density. Whenever people think density, they think up, more people in a small place, but density can also mean secondary suites, basement suites, garage suites, granny suites, even little ways to offset incomes in the single family homes we already have. Mixed use development, this can look like main floor commercial, second floor apartment living on a larger scale or even on a smaller scale, having a business and having the ability to reside as an individual or your family within your business. Again, still the integration of densification in strategic areas, meaning how do we bring density around our neighborhood amenities, the corner stores, the gas stations, to promote walkability and accessibility for our community, as well as reducing the quantity of residential districts we have in our city. We have a lot of residential districts with very, streamlined uses in each district, which I don't want to say it's a roadblock to development, but if it's not planned properly for, we can find a lot of delays to development because we're looking at doing map amendments to the bylaw, text amendment to the bylaw, all depending on a lot of schedules, can be 3 to 6 months. So they're totally doable and supported by our team. But if we're not having those conversations to the point you're looking at getting a development permit, we've delayed your project substantially, which can have costs and implications. So we're hoping to add some flexibility to the bylaw to aid in these projects.
Right. Now, the question that we all love to hate, NIMBY. And certainly, I think you certainly, I don't think there's a municipality in the country that doesn't deal with NIMBY when it comes to land use definitions, how communities are designed. Everybody's in support of, big initiatives and let's get people housed and so on. But could you do it not next door to me? So if you're unfamiliar with NIMBY, not in my backyard, you're here, you're championing housing, but please, put it in this district over here. We don't want it in our neighborhood. Advice, thoughts, insights on addressing NIMBY.
Okay, perfect. I will say I have notes because I had some ideas around this and I wanted to make sure I was able to touch on all of them. NIMBY is something we experience frequently. The one thing I've learned is early conversation and transparency can go a long way. So my first one is community engagement and education. So as a nonprofit, as a builder, as a developer, as an agency, engage with the community, be a face of the community, and be willing to come and address the concerns, smush myths, and provide transparent information. This is what the project is. This is what the project is not. We find when it seems there to be a lot of secrecy around projects, that's when NIMBYs and the power around NIMBYs really starts to grow. Just that meaningful dialogue. Bring the community into your project so that they can have a sense of ownership and that they're being a part of the solution. Not that they see the negative impacts that this is going to have on them, but they see the greater good for that. Seek input, listens to their concerns. And again, if you bring them into your project early in the project, you're likely able to take some of their feedback and apply it to your project without having substantial implications. If you wait till your project's at 99.9% done and then you go to the public, any changes are going to be costly to you, costly to the project, and might not be able to be changed. So again, come in seeking feedback opposed to telling what you're going to do. Address misconceptions. A lot of the times when we're dealing with housing, people automatically apply stereotypes, apply blanket concerns. Again, like I said before, be upfront, clear. This is what it is. This is what it is not. This is how it's going to run. This is how it's not going to run. These are the supports and mechanisms we have in place to mitigate those concerns. It's been touched on before, building partnerships. The more people that you can bring in to rally around your project, the more successful it's going to be. When people see jumping on board that this is a great project, they're much more likely to want to jump on board with you, opposed to when things go amiss. The biggest thing we can say is be a face of your project. Us as the planning team, yes, we will grant you a final decision to proceed or not, but we are not your project. You are the face of your project. And I think the last one would be long-term engagement and monitoring. Once your project's complete, it's not done. There's still sometimes lessons learned, things we could do differently, things we should apply from your perspective or mine, and continue to be a part of that neighborhood that you brought change to. How is it working? What's not working? Maybe sometimes we can change and mitigate issues that have arisen, and maybe we just take it as lessons learned for go forward. But again, just because the door is open and occupancy occurs doesn't mean the work is done.
Great, thanks. Derek?
Yeah, that's some pretty good notes you had there. Couple things I'll add. I definitely agree with everything she said. I mean, one experience I had with something like that was a specific CMHC project. And it was so funny because I remember the city, and I won't say which city because I just won't say which city, but it's not Regina, even though that's where I'm from. So the city had actually put out saying, okay, we're planning to do this type of building. And it turned out it was going to be like a 3-story women's shelter type dwelling, right? So people escaping violence. That's what it was, specifically women and children. And so they kind of put out, this is what it was going to be for. And so, when you have these community sessions, few people will come, but only the only people that really come to those types of things are the people that are going to say, don't do it, right? Not here, not in my backyard. Now, but what the city did in that circumstance was say, okay, well, if you're going to come and tell me, don't put it here, you have to tell me where we should put it, right? So it was a solution-based, tried to be a solution-based. Now, they didn't have any solutions for that, but at least they put it out there saying, okay, well, it's not here, where's it going to be? Turns out this development went exactly where the city wanted it to go. And it's quite a popular development, because the crazy part was where it was this building itself was like 100 times nicer than any house that surrounded that building. And it's crazy, right? The not in my backyard scenario, but that backyard was better than any backyard in the area, right? So, a lot of times that is what happens, right? So it's a group that went together with the city. So the city had skin in the game. They wanted to see it succeed as well. So they didn't just, say, here, build it and then walk away, right? They were part and parcel to making sure that thing was successful. So like she had mentioned, that's part of the partnership kind of thing with the group that put the building on, plus the city together, wanting it to be successful and telling people that you want it to be successful and it's not just going to go there and see you later is important. Now, she said, lead time and and just letting people know ahead of time goes a long way. I equate it to just like kids where, you know, if your kids are at a friend's house and you're there with, you know, with your friends or whatever, and you tell your kids, "Okay, we're out of here, kids, let's go." And you didn't give them 10 minutes to understand that they have 10 minutes to kind of pack it up. You know how that conversation goes, right? It doesn't go very well. So I equate it to something like that, except just with adults.
I jotted down a note, you know, turning critics into champions. And you know, I think engagement has that has the ability to be able to do that. And somebody once made an interesting comment, and I've thought about that in my own neighborhood in Calgary, that, you know, I'm not afraid of affordable housing in my neighborhood because there's a group or an organization connected to that. So sometimes, you know, you could have the most beautiful development next door to you and really, really crappy neighbors, and there's nothing you can do about those neighbors. Sometimes having an organization attached to the housing in your development or in your neighborhood means that you've got somebody that you can have a conversation with on an ongoing basis. So, you know, that process of turning critics into champions.
Can I just add one thing
You
to
bet.
that? And this is the one thing we find as a municipal sector. I don't want to point the finger at anyone because I'm not, but if this housing project is from your organization, be the face of it. We have a lot of time, especially when we are dealing with, you know, displaced individuals, drug and addiction needs, that type of population. People tend to revert to the background and we get calls as the city. Unfortunately, whether the housing project is successful or not, we can't always mitigate those issues. But I think that's what I would encourage you to do. You know, maybe it's a conversation. We've had a lot where city administration's a part of it, the organization, as well as the concerned landowners. We're happy to sit there all together. But I think your role at the table is critically important to the community buying into these projects.
Yeah. And it's such an important opportunity here today because you've got 100 people in the community that take time to meet some of the folks in your community that are part of different organizations and businesses and so on. The success moving forward is going to be based on those relationships. You know, right back to the root of NIMBY. It's the lack of relationship. It's a lack of understanding. It's a lack of transparency. And so the best way to mitigate that is through relationship. So take this today as an opportunity to initiate a conversation with somebody that you don't know in the community that could very well become one of your best champions and not your worst critic. So just being mindful of time, we've got about 5 minutes remaining. You have a room full of people here today. What's a piece of advice? What's your ask? You know, what can you ask of this group here today that would help advance housing options in the community?
First off, I'll give a shameless plug for my own project. Get involved. The city is under review of our land use bylaw. This will be your key tool to the implication, or what's the word I'm looking for? The execution of all your ideas. Implementation. That's what I was going for. Thank you. So get involved. We have wrapped up phase 1. Phase 2 is kicking off in public engagement in March. We have a website. You can connect with Dan or myself, but that will be your critical key to success. As well as with that, I would say, don't be afraid to think outside the box and challenge what we see as normal development today, standard homes. Costs of land are rising, costs of development, costs of infrastructure, costs of maintenance and operations on the municipality. Everything is going up. And I truly believe over the next 5 to 10 years, we have to be willing to embrace something different. I'm not saying I'm sitting here today knowing what the answer for different is, but we have to be willing to embark on that adventure. Look at outside municipalities. What are other people doing? What's working? What's not? What are their lessons learned? Scott said it earlier, we can talk to people outside our city and they're a wealth of knowledge in many regards. So don't be afraid to bring those ideas and come and look for solutions-based discussions with our administration.
And I'd say more along those lines as well is, I mean, everybody's in this room for a reason, right? And whatever your reason is, obviously it has to do with housing. But I would ask and just challenge a little bit to say, you know, what are you willing to do, right? What are you willing to, you're here for a reason. What are you willing to do? Okay. So, I mean, Are you willing to make that phone call to the city bylaws to say, hey, you know what, guys, this might be a better idea? Like what are you willing to do that can actually help the situation? Because I mentioned, you know, the levels of government that need to be involved and the groups that need to be involved, but there's also other people that need to be involved that actually genuinely care and just want some sort of change to happen. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens by just getting involved, like she said. So that's what I would say. What are you willing to do?
Great. Thank you, both of you. I'm not going to do an open mic session because we're kind of just chugging along half hour this, half hour that, 20 minutes of this. So what I will, so thank you both for your insights. We're going to dive into the second topic this afternoon on housing supports. And as we've described, the housing supports are about helping people be successful in their housing. It's one thing to provide the bricks and mortar, but it's something else for them to be able to live successfully in that bricks and mortar environment. So with us this afternoon are Lori Richer. She's an improvement advisor with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. She's joined us today from Guelph, and I'll get you to tell a little bit more about what brought you to this work. And Ryan Veldkamp, he's a support supervisor with the City of Red Deer Housing and Homelessness Division, and someone I'm familiar with because I hired Ryan a long time ago, and now he's sort of kicking butt and making change in Red Deer. So glad to have you both here. So Lori, perhaps we can start with you in terms of tell us a little bit more about yourself, the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm from Guelph, Ontario, so a small southwestern community or mid-sized community, I should say, in Ontario. For the last 30 years, I've been working in social work and the last 10 years in housing and homelessness and really supporting the community to make some really big changes there. Made the shift to be working with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness 3 months ago, but I've been really involved in the Built for Zero movement, and it's a national movement right across Canada. Currently, we're supporting 57 communities to end chronic and veteran homelessness, and we're currently looking at broadening that scope. We're currently working with all communities in Ontario. We're looking at a new partnership with BC and Nova Scotia, and really one of the key things of the Built for Zero philosophy is creating a really great leadership team, and then also building a coordinated access system so you really know who in your community is experiencing homelessness. You know them by name, you know what their needs are, and how best you can support them.
Great, thanks. Ryan, a little bit more about yourself, and you're kind of from this area.
Yes, I was born in Vegreville, so I was very surprised when I drove in last night and went, this is much larger than I remember it. I think it stopped at about the Pizza Hut when I was last here. And I remember the Pizza Hut fondly. So I am the superintendent with social wellness and integration supports for the city of Red Deer, and oversee the portfolios of housing and homelessness and community safety and resiliency. Specifically, started with the city of Red Deer 9.5 years ago, and actually started on the portfolio of housing, came back to housing as a supervisor about 5 years ago. And I will say being a part of Built for Zero Canada has been really impactful to our work in Red Deer relative to more, further developing our coordinated access system and having that quality by names list that provides us real-time data. So we have our teams pull monthly data that helps us understand the number of individuals in Red Deer experiencing homelessness in any given month, which, as you can guess, is a better indicator than a point in time count, simply in that you have greater access to timely data for decision making.
Great, thank you. So you've had a sense of getting to know Lloydminster a little bit this morning, and as a kid at Pizza Hut. So I've suggested that Lloydminster, you're not alone. You don't have to try to do this all by yourself. There's people that have been out there doing this work, happy to help. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about the landscape of housing and homelessness across Canada and what's out there to help Lloydminster move forward with their initiatives in terms of housing supports.
Well, I'll tout the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, so Lori doesn't have to. But they are a really great resource. If we look at advocacy efforts, certainly they're working nationally to ensure the topic of housing and homelessness are front of mind for our federal politicians, but also that they're advocating for the needs at a local level. I know I've had conversations with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness specific to Red Deer's housing and homelessness supports needs. There's also the Homeless Hub. Homeless Hub is an invaluable resource which helps capture papers and publications from internationally, but also across Canada. So if you're looking for best or promising practices, that's a great space you can go to dig in and find out a little bit more of what you're hoping to accomplish and strategies that have proven successful in other communities.
And I think too, looking at, building that coordinated access system as you're looking at that, it's been a catalyst in a lot of communities for getting started in this work and really, trying to understand every day who's experiencing homelessness in your community, what kind of supports do they need, and also helps you build the business case for additional resources, which is definitely what you need in your journey to end homelessness, is really trying to put some dedicated resources for intensive case management, street outreach, and really looking at a multi-pronged approach. You want to know who's coming into the homelessness system and how can you prevent them from coming into that. So that's a really key piece, is keeping people where they're at. The second you leave that unit, and it gets re-rented, then you're looking at a higher level of rent subsidy that you're paying. So it's really about getting that data and looking at your system from that specific lens. And it'll really help to identify what are some barriers, what are some gaps, where are some innovative solutions that we can do to do things a bit differently.
Great, thanks. So I just, I remember the early days of the housing homelessness work. It was a collection of folks who just cared. They just wanted to do something better, but it's evolved. It's not that it's not about that, but it's about so much more. There's a science, there's rigor, there's mechanisms and strategies and methodology that have been proven to work. So just what are three conditions, or what are three starting points for a community like Lloydminster in terms of creating that system that works?
So I'm going to start with collaboration. I think collaboration is probably the most impactful piece. When I think of Red Deer's current system, so it is a coordinated access process, which means that all of our agencies and all of our groups are moving in a consistent direction relative to supporting individuals experiencing homelessness. But the other really critical piece is everybody has a role to play and others are reliant on them playing that role effectively and efficiently. So because those, and sometimes our own processes get in the way, I think of our own procurement practices that can often be divisive. And so, a lot of my work is how do I mend that? How do I make sure that those agencies are striving for the same thing in the community, that we have a vision that we share, and that they all want to work together, supporting one another, helping each other. There are times where agency A is struggling relative to staffing, and I've seen other agencies say, hey, I can send some staff down to help you out. It's that really collaborative, we're all in the same ship and paddling in the same direction. And that's been really helpful for us. And then I think from a leadership perspective, we really looked at how do we lead our system in an effective way And I think governance plays such a critical piece, and I know we're going to talk about that later this afternoon. But the changed approach that we took to governance has been really effective. And a large part of that came from dialogues like this. We had similar dialogues in Red Deer, and we looked at really having a concerted vision. We understood what the values of our communities were and why we were doing the work we're doing. And I think that really helped move us all in the same direction.
Yeah, and I definitely that shared commitment to the goal that you have is huge, and that not one agency, not one person, partner, municipality can end homelessness. It's that collective coming together for that solution. And I think when I think of my experience in Guelph Wellington, we set out a goal initially to house 30 individuals, and we did surpass that, and that was just based on our point in time count information. And then once we created that coordinated access, that's when we started to see some magic happening. We were able to pull together some data, and we could see that the majority of people that we were serving had a high degree of needs. And so we had to start changing our system to really meet people where they were at. And that's where we started to see, 100 units of supportive housing coming online, public-private partnerships, those types of things. So it was really leaning into that data to see what it was telling us. And, again, going back to that diversion and prevention piece. So really trying to work at how do we keep people from coming into homelessness in the first place.
Great. Thank you. We hear the term lived experience, and I'm wondering if you can just tell me a bit, just shed some light on what is that? What does that mean? Why is it important? How is it playing out in your communities? What are some of the best ways to be able to hear the voices of people experiencing homelessness without judgment?
Yeah, and it varies right across Canada, but I think the biggest thing is that, lived experience should be involved in everything that we do. And, the saying is, nothing about us without us. And it really just goes to speak to the diversity of the individuals. Everyone's got a different experience, and their experience to resolve homelessness is also going to look different. So they need to be at the table. And some communities have, advisory committee, others have a lot of peer support workers. And just in my experience with a Niagara community in Ontario is they have veteran peers that are helping them to end veteran homelessness, and a previous vet going out there and being able to speak the same language, talk about the same things, they understand what the person's going through, makes a significant difference in someone's journey.
So we've involved lived and living experience participants in a number of ways. Back to our community housing and homelessness integrated plan in 2019, there were 13 focused dialogues with individuals with lived or living experience to get their input and making sure that they saw themselves in the community's plan. But then I think some of our greatest success came out of actioning that plan. Our Housing and Homelessness Integration Committee, which is our governance structure, provided some resources to an organization to start a lived experience council. And that council, we did a very non-city thing, and we didn't provide them with outcomes or targets or anything they needed to do. We said, this is yours. You tell us what you need from us. And provide the feedback on the system. And really the outset was create a terms of reference. What's this look like? What does this mean? What do you want this work to look like? And they actually came back to that funding body, the Housing and Homelessness Integration Committee, and they had an amazing dialogue, and HHIC was like, this is a resource we need at this table, this decision-making table. They passed a resolution that administration was to amend the council committee's bylaw to add one of the co-chairs as a voting member at that table so that they were part of every decision. And it's really been a great success. And that committee really views them as an invaluable resource. They want their opinion on every decision, making sure that they're making an informed decision.
Great. This is one of the questions that I didn't add, so I'll speak slowly so that you have time to collect your thoughts on it. There's across the country, every community is doing this differently. I mean, there's many common elements in terms of what's involved in a strong support homelessness support system. What are some of the roles that appear to be effective? And this is for our folks from the municipality. What are some of the things that municipalities can do that help empower or enable community organizations, business, others to be able to do this work?
I'm thinking of our role as a convener, the ability to bring people together like today, but also bring systems together. I think of, we saw that housing continuum. It's often multiple players, multiple systems that need to work in collaboration with one another. And that was actually something we identified in our own housing plan as something we weren't doing to the fullest extent. We were really focused on what's our legislated role and, what have we signed up to do for other funders, provincial or federal. And we weren't looking at, our role relative to unsheltered homelessness or our role relative to emergency shelters or affordable housing. And we've really started to broaden that sense of we need to be having those dialogues. They need to be our partners. We need to bring them to the table and have that conversation of how do we work together with that consistent vision. So I think that's probably one of the top things, I think.
So when you're talking about systems, are you talking about outside of the municipality or even within the municipality? Like my sense is that there's more than sort of the social services type agent or department that's involved in this work.
Yeah, that's a yes. And so it's the external agencies, our, for us, Alberta Health Services, the school districts, Red Deer Polytechnic, our CMP, et cetera. But it's also the internal, and I look at, there was a funding pool this summer from CMHC called the Housing Accelerator Fund. And our organization found such great value in bringing together all of the departments and managers and creating a plan for Red Deer around how would we really incentivize massive housing growth, to the tune of 500 additional housing units in 3 years over what the market should provide naturally. And so, it was really a challenge to us around, what are the things, I think, like a lot of the things up here that we can do to inspire that growth and make sure, and it built a great sense of camaraderie that we're all on the same team. We're all working towards the same goal. And, whether it was planning or inspections or licensing or economic development. And, we walked away with a lot of interesting messages, such as housing being such a great driver of economic development, that if you want to engage large employers, they need to know you have the housing to attract the staff that they need. So, we developed a lot of consistent messaging through that as well.
Great.
Not sure how I top that because that is one of the key important pieces. But I think it's also creating like a dedicated communication loop back with all the partners that are at the table about how things are going, where you've seen successes, celebrate them all the time, because that's a huge thing. This is a big job. Not easy to do, as a lot of people talked. I think somebody said the word hard today. And I think that's one of the key things is like, once you get that leadership group, you're bringing in the partners, having these conversations, is really looking at where you are seeing some successes, celebrate them together, and make sure that gets communicated back out.
Great. Thank you. Our closing question. You got probably a few less than 100 people here now. It looks like we maybe lost a couple at lunchtime. What's the big ask? What's the big request or suggestion that you would have for this room of community and business municipal leaders?
I think the big thing for me is that ending homelessness is possible, and really looking at, how do you achieve that, but knowing and believing that it is possible, because I think that is a key thing. Yeah, it's big, but you need to start with what you have, look at what you have that going for you, and start small and really sort of scale up from there. But it is possible.
Now I feel like you stole my homework. I think it is that start small. You can build build the system as you go, but look at the resources that you already have in place. Are they well aligned with one another? And then, as you find success and can track success and measure success and highlight that to other funders, then you can continue to build that system as you go. But look at what you already have, how you align what you have, and then how you build from there.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for joining us from Guelph, from Red Deer, coming out here to Saskatchewan. We're a block and a half in. We've really enjoyed our work here in the community, and it's nice to be able to have you come into this work as well. Lloydminster has some really great things happening, some really dedicated, committed people and organizations and leaders. And so connecting them into some of the and so before we start the third panel, I'd like you to join me in thanking these folks for volunteering to be up front and sharing with you their thoughts and perspectives, knowledge about the topic. So thank you very much. Lori.
Yes. I'm scared.
Yeah, no, I sent you the questions beforehand. Oh, you didn't get these? Oh, right. Okay.
Surprise.
So reflections on what you're seeing here today and what you're hearing in and amongst the community of Lloydminster.
Wow. You know what? I think it's great seeing everyone come here together today. I think that, everyone that I've talked to is very passionate about this work, and I hear some innovative ideas. Really love the housing first model that has started, and how many people have been housed? 22 since October. That is pretty amazing. So, I've heard a lot of great ideas here today. I think that I'd love to know what's happening here in 6 months from now, because I think I'm going to see some great things happening.
Right. Derek, what reflections on what you're seeing in here?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed some of the sessions and some of the groups that I was listening to, and there's actually a bit of a general theme that I've kind of heard, especially in the last group that I was part of, where it's a process of asking the questions to determine what it is the people you're trying to help actually need and want, right? It can't be the other way around, and it really never can. And I mean, again, I talked about kids and the analogy of kids in the morning, and I'll say it again too. It's the same thing, right? I have 3 boys myself. I mean, I love to play hockey. They all played hockey, but they didn't have a passion for it. It's not what they really wanted, right? They liked doing it. They were good at it, but they didn't really want it, right? And I mean, I asked them what else they want to do, and I think they might have done it because they said, I liked and played hockey, so Dad, yeah, I'll do that too. But the reality is, maybe had I done something different when they were 5, saying, hey, what would you really, really like to do? What do you like? What do you love? Like, how can I help you get there? I think it would have illustrated a different kind of path for them. So I saw that today too. So.
Great. Ryan.
Right. Well, I talked about the importance of collaboration, and I think this is the impetus for that, for your community. I know we went through a similar process in Red Deer, I think numerous times over the years. And it really helps solidify your direction. I really appreciated the last dialogue we just had in the circle there, learning about one another, learning about what you do. And I think the more you can do that, more you can refine who's doing what, how do we work in partnership, and keeping the end goal of how do we reduce or eliminate homelessness in Lloydminster would be critical to your future discussions for sure.
Thanks. Natasha.
I think I was told when I started this panel, I can just say what they said and be done when you're last. No, but I want to just echo that I think we have a lot of passionate people in this room with a lot of great ideas. Through Patrick's previous work of the social project or social policy framework in this project, I just hope within the room we're building connections. I think we'll get further together, working towards the same goal than we will independently. And further to that, You know, housing isn't just the problem of the individuals in the room, it's the entire community. Get your friends, get your neighbors, get them to come out and continue these conversations because the work is just beginning, but we do need champions.
Great. Thank you. I owe you a question. Yeah, from the last
And I have
panel,
notes.
and she has notes. So, I'd be in real trouble if I didn't give her the space to be able to speak to some of the critical roles or the function of the municipality, or what you're working on that people can engage with.
Yeah, so we've been given a lot of thought of to how us as a municipality can work with you and we can continue to work together. So the first opportunity is community input sessions. You know, the city of Lloydminster has Your Voice sessions. We have the Your Voice website. There is your ability to do public presentations to council. You can also attend public hearings. I collaborated with our administration before this. We're all open. If you guys have great ideas and solution-based discussions, come to us. We're always happy to have these discussions early on and set any project up for success. Continuing the creation of task force and nonprofits. This has been started with the social project framework, and I'm hoping that that continues to create momentum. The biggest role I think we will jointly play with our community leaders is our policy development to address our diverse populations, land use regulations, address housing affordability. So I would say, going back to the first one, get involved with the decisions the municipality is making, be involved, provide your input, and understand the implications they could have on your project. Education and outreach. I truly believe through the individuals here, you're going to be the ones who go out and further plant seeds, help people understand what the problems are. If they see them as true problems that affect them, affect people they love, affect people they see, they'll more likely buy in and support you. Funding allocation. I wish I had a better answer for this one. I don't think anyone in this room has that bag to financially carry these ideas to fruition. But through getting involved, through your discussions with council, we've clearly saw council's investment in these projects. So they are invested, but by continuing the momentum as a community, opposed to just Patrick carrying the weight, I think that's how we'll see these investments continue to turn over. Opportunities for community development projects. I'm going to go back to what Derek said this morning. The city is not against collaborative programs in any capacity, but come to us with great thought out ideas and something tangible in front of us that we can look at and get on board. It shows that you're invested, your time, your organization is behind it, and you really want to see this to come to fruition. We see countless meetings of people who sit down, Natasha, I have a great idea. This is what it is. Well, it leaves me with nothing to take on. It's not my project I'm trying to be a champion of. I'm there to support you, but you need to put in the effort as well. And the last one that comes down to is just continuing the discussion around equity and inclusive initiatives. This collaborative approach will continue to include those, addressing systematic barriers. I may not see something as a barrier, but you guys from your organization are, and just continuing the conversation and bringing those to our attention.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. I'm redeemed. Some other critical roles. We touched on this a little bit in the other panels, but critical roles for the municipality, critical roles for business, critical roles for community. We heard Avery as part of his summary. Was it your last session, or was it Adam's session that just said we need the business community? There's a space in this conversation for the business community. So, one or two sort of top roles for the municipality, for business, for the human services sector.
Yeah, so I touched on this earlier, and I talked about that convener role. But I think also there's like a specific type of convener relative to governance and oversight. And from the city of Red Deer, that's one learning that we had from our community discussions like this, was that we needed better representation. We have a council committee to help keep housing a topic of discussion. and keep it at the forefront of our kind of agenda as a municipality. But we also looked at who needs to be part of those dialogues and how do we have more representative voices at that table. So I mentioned how we now have the Lived Experience Council, one of the co-chairs as a voting member. You know, we have our business community, we have various Indigenous representatives, we have service providers, we have emergency shelter service providers. And so we really have a robust voice that's helping us provide direction on how we're going to move forward. And I think that's a critical role a municipality can play.
And I think just to build on that, you know, I saw some faces when I said ending homelessness is possible, and just wanted to share like some of the successes you can see when you get those partnerships that come together. And you know, a good project is Kindle Communities in Guelph, Ontario, and we really saw where the community was talking about sort of 10 tiny homes that you know morphed into buying a nonprofit agency bought a motel, and they didn't have the money to convert that motel, but they were able to partner with the municipality, and the application went through for federal rapid housing initiative funding, and the project was successful to get that funding to renovate that motel and then provide 32 units of supportive housing. And I think that's where you get to see some of those partnerships, and we're starting to see where developers are purchasing an old building to convert it into supportive housing. So we are starting to see some of those partnerships come to fruition, or you know, developers donating some land, and then how are they partnering with a nonprofit or a health provider to provide those housing supports. So you know, really starting to see some of those great successes.
Derek, some of the critical roles for business, community, and municipality.
It hasn't been touched on, maybe a little bit, but I mean, what I kind of talked about in my previous statement about what do people actually need, but then also further, CMHC's big thing, or one of the big things we try to do, is just try to think outside the box. Everybody says it all the time, but thinking outside the box can mean a lot of different things, right? Like, so you just mentioned a motel that was probably not being used very well, or very, very, you know, underutilized in terms of people that are staying there in the night. Maybe it was run down, whatever. Typically, that's what I'm thinking anyways. You turn into 32 units, right? So just some thinking like that, where it goes, okay, well, we got a roof here. If we put a little bit of money into it, then we can get 32 units just like that. You know, I know it's not just like that, but essentially more than permits and everything. And I mean, it takes the city to say, okay, yeah, we can do that and that kind of thing. And Regina's had some success in doing that too. But even further on, things like just trying different things. Like anytime I see any type of housing development of any kind on the news, I look at it and say, okay, well, I wonder if this would work here, right? So I saw, this is down east somewhere. I think it's the Maritimes, but essentially it was like 50 single bedroom type dwellings, and maybe they were like 100 square feet, and they had a microwave, a kitchen sink, a toilet, and a bed, and like a TV or whatever. So it was very, very small, but they were just beside each other, right? So all separately detached, but all beside each other. And they were specifically for just single people, no families, somewhere to go to live. And I think it was the province that actually said, okay, if you're on the list, you're taken care of. Like, you don't have to worry about utilities, right? Because it was a slab floor. It was very, very efficient heat, like a radiant type heating, where you know the heat was monitored from one place, where they didn't have, because that's some of the problem too. Turn up the heat, turn down the heat, doors open, moisture gets in. Like it starts to become an issue there. But this was all maintained, like the inside, like it was a concrete floor. So if the tenants wanted something different, they would buy their own rug, right? So saves replacing flooring and that kind of thing. But I think it was very well thought out. So I think, okay, well, that might work, something, you know, something like that in any city, really. So the point is just keeping your mind open about what actually might work, right? So we talked about an encampment. Well, how can you fit what they want, and they're telling you they want, in an encampment style housing system? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but we could probably figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. This community is no stranger to being creative. I mean, somehow over the past 100 years or so, you've figured out how to navigate two provincial jurisdictions, unlike anybody else on the planet, actually, that we were able to find.
Have you? No.
I mean, Aside from, I have to say, Flin Flon, I did not realize that there were 300 people in Flin Flon that lived in Saskatchewan, but hey, we all learn something new each day. So innovation thrives here. Opportunity thrives here. These are words that we've heard from the community countless times. As we head into this this last round of exercises, the group that's going to be over on this side of the room is going to explore some core competencies needed in terms of leadership and governance relative to housing and homelessness. And I want to I want to draw you back to the CMHC diagram that I ripped off from Derek and company. I don't want the conversation to just simply focus on homelessness. It isn't. It's about housing, and it's for housing for working people, for newcomers to the community. So it's the whole spectrum. So while this afternoon has been focused on housing supports, which is primarily around addressing the homelessness in the community, continue to think about the housing and homelessness in the full spectrum. So I'm going to ask the members of panel here to think of one or two core competencies from leaders that you've seen in this realm that really make a difference. So you're really giving the group that's going to be on this side a bit of a head start in terms of identifying the core competencies. And the work on this side goes beyond that. I think you'll have some fun. So Derek, you've got the mic. One or two core competencies needed in leadership and governance.
Good question. Well, I probably don't have them because I wouldn't be sitting here if I did. No.
Humor.
Yeah, I would have to say, like, you have to have the right people in the right roles. So what I mean by that is there's no point to have someone who has little knowledge or little passion in the housing director chair if they don't actually believe in what they're doing there. And I've seen it so many times working with proponents on applications where I just wonder, like, are you actually trying with this? Because I just don't feel like you're putting in what you need to put in to actually have this done. So the people that are in the chair of trying to get some of these things through actually have to have a passion, not even experience as much, just an actual passion and willingness to help to get there. Because if that's missing, they have a very, very small chance. This business is hard enough in the affordable housing realm to try to get something off the ground and built. Without the passion and the energy and the drive, it's just not going to get there.
Great.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is sort of being a relentless leader, right? You've got that grit. You want to keep going forward no matter what, and you know you're in it for making change. And as well, you kind of come to this with a fail forward sort of mindset that you're going to keep trying things. This one might not work, but the other two might, right? And so, yeah, those would be my key things.
That was a really good one. I'm going to go with a humility. I think on some of the committees that I sit, there's just a willingness to constantly learn and be open to the notion that you might not know everything, that you may need to learn from others, that you need to listen intently and hear what people are telling you, what their needs are. And I think that's a key trait for sure.
I'll just comment on that one because in the early days, boy, if we sort of flip the clock back to 2001 when we were really just starting this work in Alberta, I mean, we were delivering soup and socks every night thinking we're solving the problem until somebody said, yeah, but they're still homeless. We're like, oh, right. Yeah, we're just making homelessness more comfortable. And if we weren't open to hearing that mindset, we wouldn't be where we're at in terms of housing first. If we didn't dig, if the leaders in the community didn't do the research and bring it forward to the city saying we could do this better, we might still be where we were delivering soup and socks. So other competencies, Natasha.
Well, considering my number one was stolen, I guess that's the risk of being number 4. I think in this housing one, I think a big thing would be willing to stick your neck out and take risks. Housing is not a one size fits all solutions. What worked in Red Deer may or may not work here. And we just need the team of individuals who are prepared to put those ideas out there, put pen to paper and try them. And until we try them, you might succeed and you might learn a lesson. So.
Great. I'm not going to run the microphone this way. So I'll leave it open to whoever has a success story first. But, you know, you've all been involved in this work for a while, and you've seen situations, you've heard of stories, you've experienced some things. What's one of your favorite success stories? And it's not like it blew everything else out of the water. There were lessons learned and everything else, but what's one of your favorite success stories that you've heard or that you've been part of in this world of housing and homelessness?
I work for the city of Lloydminster. We're working on it.
There's your success story.
I feel like I have a few, but I feel like the one that sticks out, that gives me the most sense of pride, I guess, would be the reduction that Guelph Wellington has seen in youth homelessness. You know, oftentimes, you know, youth, if they don't get the support that they need, will oftentimes come into the adult system, and just really seeing the passion that that team came to the table with to say they weren't okay with just giving out socks anymore. You know, and that, you know, they didn't want to welcome people into the youth shelter. And how do we be more proactive to get youth to not have to come to the shelter, and working on family reunification strategies? Or, you know, how can we give youth a little bit of funding so that they can stay where they're at for a little bit of time? And I think that's the one that kind of means the most to me, was like seeing, I mean, you know, we went from 72 youth experiencing chronic homelessness to now it's under 10, and they've been able to maintain that. So still haven't gotten to 0, but they've been able to maintain that kind of reduction, and now kind of go out into the community teaching teachers on what to look for and diversion and prevention, those types of things. So that to me was one of the most meaningful ones.
Eric.
There was a small one. So so CMHC, we look at, well, I mentioned before, some of our programs, like there is some home ownership programs, there's the rapid housing programs. We work with some urban indigenous groups as well to subsidize some housing as well. And there was one group that I work with specifically where there's a couple houses actually in Regina that they just were basically needed to be torn down. Like they were just run down to the point of just not usable anymore. And CMHC at the time was basically telling the group, yeah, we're just going to take them offline, and you know, we'll give you the lots and you can do whatever you want with it. And then I was like, you guys, like, is this really our answer to a group we've worked with? Is we're going to let you take the lots and do with them what you want? I said, we've been with this group like every step of the way. I was like, why can't we facilitate just building 2 units how we want to build them, like maybe an up-down duplex, whatever the city bylaws will allow, and just pay the $300,000 it's going to cost at that time to do both with some of the providers that we had. And, you know, I went around legal and I went around some of these other places for what bounced around. And finally we came back and said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. Like, so, because I was almost to the point where I was like, let's put our money where our mouth is, right? We're the Housing Agency of Canada, and we're telling a group that doesn't have money to take 300,000 of money they don't have to build 2 units. I said, it's never going to work. We have to, if we're actually going to be a leader in this, we have to put our foot forward right off the bat. So they finally did it. And, you know, there's probably 4, I think we did do an up-down duplex on a tiny lot, and it's cramped, but it's 2 units, 4 units in total. So there's 4 families now that have a place. So I thought that was a win.
Right. Ryan.
Like Lloydminster, Red Deer identified an overrepresentation of Indigenous populations who are experiencing homelessness. And so we provide a variety of Indigenous support services, and there's a particular set of money or pool of money that is for Indigenous supports. However, we got strong feedback from our community that our Western processes weren't working, that using RFPs that were divisive in nature wasn't building community, and we needed to explore something else. So we worked with our Indigenous community An elder was appointed, and we had discussions on what a new process could look like to make funding decisions that would be more robust, more inclusive, and ultimately would leave everybody walking away with a good sense that this was the right thing for the community. So we designed the process together with an elder, and the process included 100% Indigenous representation in terms of decision makers. It included having the service providers at the table to help provide the knowledge and insight into what was needed. And ultimately, funding decisions were made, and we debriefed the process. And one of our community members told us that it was the best act of reconciliation they'd ever seen from the city. And one of the elements being that we truly gave them the full authority over the dollars, and it didn't have to come back to council. It didn't have to go to another level for decision making. They were the decision makers in the decisions that impacted them. And I think that was one of our greatest successes.
Great. Thank you.
I will say that the city of Lloydminster, we're working towards our success, but I do have to acknowledge our council who's allocated the funds and Patrick's team through the social policy framework and this final recommendation, because I think the work that's being done here in 3 to 5 years will set us up for our first big success. So,
Great.
there you
Yes,
go.
I don't disagree. It just one more thing before we break into the workout groups. I wonder, and maybe this is a question for Lori or Ryan or the two of you, but can you talk about the level of success that we're seeing across the country by adopting a housing first philosophy? Like, what is it actually working?
I'll start. I'll start from an Alberta lens, and acknowledging that Alberta was one of the first provinces to have a robust process around adopting housing first and implementing 10-year plans to end homelessness. And it helped us really build this vision that ending homelessness was possible. And we've made significant strides towards it. I feel like it was just until like pre-COVID or just at around COVID times when we started to see numbers really spike and increase. But there were some notable improvements, including I think Medicine Hat is a great example of a community that proved to the nation that ending chronic homelessness was possible. And yes, you know, that it's definition based, it's a point in time, but they did prove that it's possible and can be reproduced across the nation.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we currently have 3 communities that have reached, you know, functional zero on veteran homelessness, right? So what that means is their system is set up robust enough that the second that a veteran identifies, they're able to quickly get them housed and back into a housing situation quickly. And so we have 3 of those communities, and we were seeing really good results in people reducing chronic homelessness. The pandemic has shifted that a little bit, and I'm not going to lie that there are, you know, we've lost some of those gains, right? We used to have at least 8 communities that had reached a 10% reduction in chronic homelessness, some that were close to functional zero, and they've just eked out of that just now. But some held on to that for 5 years. So they were able to keep making improvements to their system, right, to really drive down those reductions. So pressure has been a lot more lately than before. But what I love to see is that the communities are still holding fast, that this is still their goal and that they are going to do whatever it takes to get there. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm also curious, perhaps some thoughts or perspectives around natural disasters and their impact on homelessness in communities. So, you know, whether that's an experience that's been validated yet or not, but as communities are evacuated and sent to other urban centers, sometimes, you know, what have I got to go home for? It's just as bad here as it was there, so I might as well stay here where maybe there's some supports. Any thoughts or research coming out in that regard? And no is an appropriate answer.
I'm trying to, you know, Yeah, I think I wish homelessness was treated like a national disaster, and that we would put the same things into place that we would if there was a forest fire or a flood or something like that. Create emergency housing, really try to get people where they need to go. But yeah, I think you know, COVID has had a significant impact. I don't think there's been studies to show just how much of this impact, but you know, we do hear that things will get worse before they get better in terms of like the housing crisis, things like that. But I don't know that there's been studies that I'm aware of on showing that long-term impact on communities from things like a
From people
pandemic.
being displaced. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you again, all of you for engaging in this conversation. It's been very helpful and informative. I was just checking, we're still within a minute of our timelines. Wrap up. I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to share any final thoughts, ahas, insights, learnings, anything that happened for you today. We'll just take a few comments from the floor. Then I'm going to hand it back over to Patrick and Laura Lee to wrap us up. Is that a surprise to you, Laura Lee? Thoughts, insights? Yeah. Was that, were you looking at? Okay.
know if I need to say it. I just wanted to maybe go a little bit more into the housing first approach, because I think a lot of people in this room have never actually heard about that and what it actually entails as far as getting people into housing, but also having supports within that and what that looks like as far as trauma-informed care. So if you look at people that have been veteran unhoused, most likely, I think it's what, an 85% chance that they have experienced extreme trauma within their life, which can cause perpetual problems with systems, addictions, mental health. And so it's not just one issue where they need to get a job or they need to get their stuff together. It's a collaborative approach needs to be taken in order to help these people. So that I think is what the Housing First really touches on, and that's why they've had so much success, I suppose.
Others? We know that there's a housing first approach happening here in the community. So congratulations to all, like we've connected with you. We say, keep moving forward with that. Reach out to some of these other groups and organizations that have been doing this work. Learn the lessons. Move forward with the support of your community on those initiatives. Other thoughts? Jason? Yeah, I'll be right back. Okay.
Thanks. One of the things that was discussed at our table here just here recently, the reality is we may have 95, 98, 99% of what we need to end homelessness. We have the people, we have the mindsets, we have possibly the infrastructure. If we look at what's truly available out there, we have the organizations that are doing the good work, and we have a community that does have money. Now we just need to get it into the right hands. So it kind of got me thinking that this is really, really cool that, we're potentially on the cusp of ending homelessness. Now it's going to take a lot of work, but we have all the right tools and all the right building blocks to do it. So it kind of got me really thinking that comment. Where does Denise said that kind of, I don't know where she went. Oh, she's way back there. Yeah. So just kind of got me thinking that we really quite possibly have everything we need right here, right now.
I think thank you for leaving us with that comment, because we truly believe that as well.
Hi. So just to add to what that gentleman was saying, yes, we have everything here. to work on this issue and to bring it forward. My challenge to everybody is let's do something, because in 2 years' time, we're going to be having the same conversation about the same problem if we don't do something now. That's my challenge. So, sorry.
Great. We know we have what we need. We just have to move it all in the same direction, getting everybody in the same boat, pulling in the same direction. Dan.
Can I tell a joke? So Scott introduces himself to me, asked me to volunteer like he likes to do. And I said, my name is Stan Bagheera. Oh, and he said, Bagheera? Yeah. I said, if you remember the Jungle Book. Yeah. Well, the Black Panther, all sleek and muscular. He could have gone with that, but he said instead, his name wasn't Stan. On one of the slides, I remember seeing business engagement, and I was happy to be acquainted with a couple of folks with residents in recovery, LVE, and so forth. And I think in addition to Homes First? Housing First, sorry. In addition to Housing First, this is like a next step. So we decided that we're going to meet with the work that I do. We need to almost tweak the mindset of the business sector. And we have one thing, just to be open to employment opportunities and support for these people, whether it's job shadowed or otherwise. Yeah, we thought that would be a great next step and helping them move forward so we're not back here in 2 years' time. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. One last call, and then I'm going to ask Patrick and Laura Lee to wrap up for us. In terms of next steps, I have a slide actually. Oh, look, closing remarks and next steps. One of the very first slides we talked about is that we're sort of right near the end of this process. So our team, we're doing some storyboarding tonight, mapping out sort of the final report. We've got a lot written already. We're looking at trying to pull all this together by the end of February so that we can bring it to council by mid-March. And as I said at the outset, when you see the report, there shouldn't be anything in there that's a surprise to you. We've brought it all forward. You've had a chance to talk about it. You've had a chance to think about it, give us your feedback on it. We're going to take that, incorporate and the best compliment to us is that you pick up the report and go, yep, that sounds like us. That sounds like our community. And that's what we hope we've been able to do. You've already designed the boat. You've already identified the people that are manning the paddles. All the report is saying we're heading off in this direction based on your insights so that we're not here 2 years from now wondering what happened with it. Okay.
Well, thank you, Scott. What an incredible day it's been as we all kind of had our collective wisdom in this room and started to think about, we're well on the road of thinking about how do we end homelessness and really provide housing for those individuals in our community who are unhoused and need our support the most. So I think one of the things that excited me the most about this conference was, and Patrick, I don't know, where are you? Patrick had this little big idea back in the fall about having a housing conference. Who do we know that could pull this off so quickly and so well, other than Patrick and his team? So maybe a round of applause for them. So as he started to promote the conference and open registration, and we saw those numbers coming in, it was pretty exciting for us to see that we're not the only ones that are interested in being part of this conversation. So so glad you joined today, that you shared your passion, your ideas, your concerns, your wisdom. and your commitment to making sure that this doesn't sit on the shelf, Deb, that we actually can move it forward in a meaningful way. And so I'm confident that Scott, when we see this final report, will go, uh-huh, that's exactly what we were thinking. And I know that my council colleagues and city administration will be looking forward to that report too, to see what is the municipality's role in supporting the community, as this is everyone in our community's issue, as we work together to really make sure that we're meeting the needs of the people that are living in our community. So thank you for your big gift of time today. And I'll look forward to those next conversations and hearing from you. Al Marin at Lloydminster.ca. Email me anytime with your big ideas about housing. Would love to hear them.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thank you again to you, everyone who took some time today to have a conversation about housing and homelessness and talk about some solutions moving forward. I'm very grateful for your time, and I learned a lot talking to a lot of you today and reconnecting with some of you. And I hope you all learned something today and did some reconnection as well. Just a couple of notes on moving forward pieces. Scott kind of outlined some of our timelines for completing the report. For those of you who registered with us for this event using email, we have your email. We would like to share information going forward with you when the report is complete. We would like to make sure that you have access to that and that you're kept in the loop. Having said that, what's the word I'm looking for? Spam legislation requires that if I am sending you too much stuff, let me know and we will take you off the list. But we've got you there. If you're not sure if we have your email, you can check in with our team at the back desk there and we will collect some information from you so that we can get it to you. I'd also like to thank my team, Marie-Pierre, Sheena, my colleagues with Planning Development, Natasha, Dan, Economic Development, Catlin. We have folks from senior leadership here today. I would like to thank our speakers, our panelists who came to Lloydminster to share their knowledge with our community and and their experiences and have those conversations. And especially I'd like to thank Scott and his team who've been with us on this learning journey over not just the last 7 months, but it feels like the last year now. Of having conversations with you and really helping us get to know our community better as well. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say other than, again, really appreciate you guys coming, joining, sharing, and again, a big thank you to everyone who helped make today possible. So thank you. And steal a cookie on your way out.